There we go. Matt, we're live. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Burke.
All right, let's start with a very, very quick intro about who Matt is and how he got to where he is today.
Yeah, Matt. Gosh, as a person today, I would describe Matt as resilient. I would describe myself first and foremost in that way. Been that way my entire life. I grew up in the deep South of Louisiana. You know, Pretty decent educational opportunities, at least for the part of the state I was in. But nowhere near. Other parts of the nation, right? So that down there, the ethos of the people is that of hard work, of grit, of perseverance, of taking the little bit that you have and turning it into the most that you can. So that's who Matt would be at his core. From a professional standpoint, I was trained as a mechanical engineer. That's what I got my undergrad degree in, and I went to work for what is now one of the world's premier lithium mining and producing companies, Albemarle Corporation. Their stock's done very well over the last 5 or 6 years, as you might imagine. But I worked for them my entire engineering career. While I was there, I took night classes to get a master's in business administration from LSU. And so I've always had that entrepreneurial bug, if you will, that pull to do something in business. But it really took a catalyst to get me into the venture capital industry, and just so happened to be a friend of the family raising money for his startup. I came in, and he pitched us one night at a dinner we were having, a big group of us. And I went up to him after, and I just said, "Look, this is pretty amazing. I don't have any money to give you right now." I think I was 25, 26 at the time, and I said, "I'd like to help in any way." And so through helping him, the lead investor that we ended up getting for that company actually offered me a job about a month after our first visit with him. And so yeah, it was out of curiosity, right, and out of just a general passion for helping other people that I ended up finding my passion, right, and I still get to use my engineering degree today. Luckily for us at Foundt Capital, we don't. One of our expenses is not outsourcing technical due diligence. I handle that part for us. I have one other partner there. We're still a small team, but we're starting to grow. We feel like we're starting to do some pretty big things.
It's rare you get to see venture capitalists who actually knows what they're talking about. A lot of them, they come from traditional corporate finance, and now the fact that you actually come from that world and you know how engineers think and you've been an engineer yourself, that's absolutely amazing. Before we began the recording, we're talking about why charisma is such a big part of the fundraising process, and you were
Oh yeah.
talking about charisma is a big part, but then I had to cut you off before you said the other things. I'd love to continue that conversation while we're actually recording here.
Absolutely, Burke. It's one thing. It's one thing to have charisma, right? And for a lot of people that is it can be difficult, especially for a more technical founder, as you touched on. But what I like to see is charisma coupled with a vision, right? So if you can get me excited about what you're doing, and then you can also show me how we're going to get there, and just I'll go ahead and sign the check, right? It's kind of that age old. If we're in the room together, if we're across the desk from each other, and we start finishing each other's sentences, yeah, we probably have a deal. Um, but yeah, it's that coupling of charisma and moxie and passion, along with a vision or a roadmap of how you're going to get there.
Absolutely.
And to that, I might add one more thing. One of my favorite VCs, Mike Maples Jr. Mike talks a lot about figuring out is a founder and/or the founding team, are they living and building in the future? And that's another key element, right? That kind of goes along with charisma plus a plan of action. And in that plan of action, I've I've learned over the years to start looking. Are they? Is the founder and her team or his team, are they actually living and building this thing in the future? Because if they're trying to change the way that we interact with whatever it may be, whether it's the new advent of AI, or back in the late '90s, the advent of the search engine, right? That was all brand new. Those people were living in the future. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, they lived and built Google in the future. They were thinking a decade ahead. So that's something I think that's important for VCs to look for, and it's also important for founders. It's like you can have a great idea, but if you're still caught up in the way things are going today, and part of your plan is to actually have a paradigm shift, right? To shift the way we as humans interact with whatever it may be, right? The internet, the way we, store and use energy, which is a space that I'm in and passionate about, whatever it is, you have to show that, and you have to convey that in your vision, you're actually already there. In your mind, you already see what it looks like.
Absolutely. You talked about having charisma, but also moxie, also vision, being able to
Yep.
really make the investor feel like they're living in the future that you're trying to create. I've met a lot of very technical founders who are
Mm-hmm.
like very amazing at like the product side of things. They're obsessed. They make sure it's the best in the world. But when it comes to communication, when it comes to really being able to excite people, when it comes to being able to sit across the table and really show you the future, their communication skills, their enthusiasm, it's not always there. So if you are one of those types, right, you are the kind of very technical, very obsessive type, should you try and just like pull that enthusiasm out of you and train yourself, or should you go find a co-founder like say Travis Kalanick, who can actually go out there, sit in front of VCs and make them feel so great and awesome and all this kind of stuff?
That's a really really good question. I I would prefer. I always like to play to my strengths. I'm one of these people. I don't believe in um, this whole idea of well-roundedness. And I feel like it was my generation. I'm 33, and I just remember that being like the big push for moms at the time. And my mom was always talking about well-rounded, well-rounded. Like, to me, your character should be well-rounded. You should be able to at a minimum get along with anybody that comes from any walk of life. All right, but as far as your strengths and your weaknesses, um, if you feel like you're kind of right there on that edge, you just need to polish your communication, then by all means, spend a little time working on yourself. The best investment you're going to make is always going to be in self-improvement. It just is. It's the one that pays the most dividends. um, but if you are just all the way, um, let me use Steve Wozniak as an example, right? There would be no Apple without the Woz. I love Steve Jobs, right? I'm a huge fan of Jobs, but they needed each other, right? Steve was not as technical as most people probably give him credit for. Oh, Steve Jobs invented this. Yeah, sort of. He had a vision, and he knew how to sell it. Wozniak knew how to build it, right? And so for Woz, I think Woz does have charisma in his own unique way, but he and Steve needed each other. And that there's an age old saying, right? 1 + 1 = 3. And so if you're out way out in the technical field, like a Steve Wozniak, go find your Steve Jobs, right? Go find someone who's good at marketing, who can spin up and sell a vision. Even Zuckerberg had, was it Sean? Who was the guy that founded
Sean
Napster? He
Parker?
was an early Sean Parker. There you go. Um, the guy had a ton of charisma, right? And Zuck has grown into that role, obviously, but maybe he didn't. Maybe he realized early on he didn't have it, but Sean Parker did. So yeah, wherever you're at, the most important thing is to be honest with yourself, right? We know ourselves better than anyone else. So as long as you're being honest with yourself, and you're being honest, about what it is that you can and can't do, then you'll be just fine. But yeah, never be afraid to hire people who um, who are better at the things that you are not. Be careful not to surround yourself with people who are just like you. That's the comfortable choice, and that's going to lead you to nowhere because it's just going to be a constant patting on the back and telling you how great you're doing. You need people who are good at the things that you're not, so that they can catch. Hopefully, they catch the certain pitfalls that are going to come up with being led by one person.
And Matt, you talked about if you're the Wozniak type, finding your your jobs to complete that equation. Now, obviously, they met at these little computer meetups, and they built a relationship over that, and they were introduced to mutual friends. But obviously, right now in the world we're in, maybe it's not as simple. If you're a technical founder today and you've got these brilliant ideas around products, you're already scrappy, you're already building stuff in your garage, how do you find a jobs type that you can also trust, that you can also rely on, that's not gonna try and defraud you in some way or take advantage of you? How do you go about finding and filtering people?
So I'll say it this way: in the digital age, right, we have unprecedented access to each other, right? But nothing will, when it comes down to actually evaluating and figuring out, what hire you're going to make or who you're going to hire. You can't get around meeting them in person, right? And um, I would say first and foremost, if you're in the thick of things, you're in the day in day out grind of your startup. I still believe that marketing on LinkedIn is still, it's just severely underutilized, right? I don't think you need to go out and hire, not in the early days anyway. I don't think you need to go out and hire, a staffing firm or a recruiting firm to go out and find people for you, right? Like, get on LinkedIn, search some keywords, sort through some people, and just reach out. Send a cold DM. Make sure they're in your same town, or at least within a hour drive, 30-minute to an hour drive, no more than that. And then schedule that meetup right after you've kind of had maybe an initial phone call, right? You shoot them a quick note on LinkedIn. Hey, they come back, they're interested. Have a phone call, kind of feel each other out, see if your visions align, and then go meet them in person, right? There's just nothing that is going to replace. Um, I'm sure you've experienced this, Burke. That matching of energy, right? You know when you're sitting across or sitting next to someone who you're going to be able to work with, right? Sometimes that changes over time. I'm not saying we get it right every time, but yeah, that would be my advice. It's LinkedIn is just such an underutilized tool. Now, if you have a little more time on your hands, right, look on Eventbrite, like Google and see what kind of tech events or startup events are going on in your city or your town, or the biggest town near you. Right? And get over there because you're going to run into like-minded people at those events. You just will. Um, we I'll give you a quick example. March of 2022, we were probably about 6 months into one of our battery ventures. We decided to go to the Middle East Energy Show in Dubai. So we all fly over to Dubai, and we end up meeting at the time, a gentleman who was from India, and now he heads up, really Middle East, India, we call MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and then into India as well. He leads the sales for us in that region, and we met him just by going. Now, I'm not saying you have to fly around the world. I'm just saying that event was a group of like-minded people. It was a renewable energies event, point blank, and that's how we met, one of our key members now.
I think industries like energy and healthcare and health tech, these to an
Yep.
extent kind of intimidate, especially younger founders, because it's very difficult to get started. You've got to really build really well polished products. You've got to make sure they work. You got to fundraise, and the amount of VCs who are excited by things like this are far lower than than VCs that are excited by software and apps and simple consumer companies. I want to get your take on, if you're a founder today and you're thinking, what, I want to build in energy, I want to build in healthcare, I want to build in these really important industries that have a high barrier to entry. What kind of trajectory should they design for themselves? Who kind of people should they try and talk to? What kind of paths should they take?
So I think, in terms of how would I structure, if I was just starting this out, the first thing I would want to do, is build a great advisory board, right? Somewhere 3 to 5, no more than 5 members, um, that I can call on, right? We can meet quarterly, or um, we can have discussions as needed. But you want to have people who have at least 20 plus years in your field. Um, that's not a hard and fast rule, but just make sure they have at least a decade more experience than you do. Um, because you're going to need that, right? And it doesn't have to all be technical folks, right? Um, there's a member of our board for a venture who not a technical bone in the guy's body. He was a history major at USC, but he's brilliant, and he has a Rolodex that could stretch across, from East Coast to West Coast of this country. He knows everyone, and he's been crucial, right? I would almost say, like, if there was a 3 member board, find someone who's got a huge Rolodex and who believes in what you're doing. Because then that kind of makes the fundraising process just a little bit easier, right? Warm intros are always better than cold, but that would be my first step, right? And then you have to be prepared for, getting into these industries that we're in. If you're talking about health tech, healthcare, clean energy, the energy space in general, you gotta be prepared for like 2 years of just grinding it out, right? And you're gonna be operating probably on a shoestring budget, right? You're gonna need, you need to go out and raise, 300 to 500 grand. You're probably not gonna be drawing much of a salary off of that. It's gonna be a lot of ramen noodle nights, but that's the way to do it. You really have to embrace the grind. And unless if you're a seasoned professional coming into any of the industries that we operate, maybe you've built up a little bit of savings yourself, and you can self fund. But if you're jumping in as 20, 22, 24, 25 year old, maybe you aren't in that position. And if you aren't, just realize that everyone's on their own path, right? I'm not knocking the software industry at all. We're in a software company, right? Or it's a portion of a company that we're in. But when you start getting into, in my opinion, healthcare, health tech, energy, um, you're building something. You're wanting to build something that lasts. To your point, because the barrier of entry is high, and because it is so difficult, you're not really you're not really competing with that many other groups. You're just not. And so you have a unique opportunity. What you're trading, what your trade off is, I can build software quickly, but there might be 1,000 other people doing what I'm doing, and now it's just a race to see who can do it first. Whereas this, you're trading kind of some fast potential success for, if I can just grind it out, and if I can just stay in it, right, and I can show up and be consistent, you're going to build something, right, and you're going to have a business. It's just going to take a little longer than you think.
Absolutely. I want to touch on the first point you made, which is the advisory board. So
Yep.
obviously, there's you go to a conference like the one in Dubai, and you're meeting gentlemen there, and one of them has 30 years of experience in the industry. You're like, oh, hey, look, I'm building this. I really believe it can be this. Would you want to help me out building this? Just be on my advisory board. Give me some of your time every week, every month. What are some other ways, then you go out to events, say like approaching people online, like you talked about LinkedIn. What kind of messages do you send to convince someone to get on your advisory board? How do you build that relationship to begin with?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that if you're going to be a founder, no matter if you're a technical founder and you're a little more introverted, the one thing you're going to have to get used to is cold outreach, right? And that's a little easier to do over an email or over a LinkedIn message. And the way you want to structure it is as genuine as possible. If you're a young, I remember early on in my career, I would reach out to people I had no business reaching out to, and I would just be extremely genuine in asking for their time and their expertise. And I would always be sure to say, there's no free lunch. Yeah, I'd like to offer you advisory shares or whatever the case may be, right? Um, I will. I'd be careful not to name names, I suppose, but very famous hedge fund trader. All right, we're going to use two of them, and they have publicly had some feuds that may give away who the two gentlemen are. But um, I was back in late 2018. I was bidding on an energy asset, and it had gone into bankruptcy. And the company we were bidding against, we were essentially trying to outmaneuver. Um, a hedge fund guy, an activist guy, had just bought in a controlling stake of the company we were up against. So I start thinking, like, what are some ways that I can, how do I thwart this guy? I mean, this guy's worth like $20 billion. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, he's Wall Street legend. And I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. I'm 27 at the time. And the idea hits me. I said, I'm going to reach out to his nemesis. And in my subject line, I put advice taking on, and I put the guy's last name. Advice taking on X person, because I thought that might get his attention. He responded back within 20 minutes. So do your research on the person that you're going to reach out to. Even if they're not some high profile hedge fund guy, do your research on them, right? Know the things they like to talk about, know the things that they're interested in, because that increases your chances of getting a response, right? If I were going to reach out, to Mark Cuban, right, I might put something about like, hey, how do we lower the cost of this prescription drug by 80%? Might get a response from him. Why? Because that's a hot button issue for him right now. You see, he started cost plus drugs. Clearly, that's something that he's passionate about. So if I'm trying to get a response from him, that may be my subject line. So my advice there is, research who it is you're going to reach out to, and then craft a genuine message. Right? If I were in your shoes, Burke, younger guy, you lead with that, right? Hey, my name's Burke. I'm reaching out. I'm looking for some advice. I'm a young guy who's trying to learn. I can't think of many people that would not respond to that if they read that email. Right? No one wants to turn down. We as human beings, we inherently love to help people. At least most of us.
I think that story is absolutely amazing. Reaching out to the nemesis and finding a way to. Oh my,
Yeah,
that
and
is.
I'll tell you offline who it was, and you'll get a real kick out of it. But sorry, audience. I don't want to put them out there like that.
That's absolutely brilliant. What are some other things you've done that are like scrappy like that you've just like I'm always fascinated by like things
Yeah.
that people do that like the unknown stories. Do you have any other stories like that?
Oh, big time. How I got started in VC just came from cold calling. Um, Once again, I guess I like to set the bar high and see what happens. I've reached out to Warren Buffett before. He's not responded, but I sent him like a handwritten letter. I can still tell you their address. It's 3555 Farnham Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 3555. Uh, I just That's just the way I am. It's just if it's it's one thing to be if you're introverted as a founder, that's not a problem. Like people talk about being introverted sometimes as if it's negative. Um, I would say I even have some introverted qualities. There are certain times when I just like to be to myself. But the one thing you can't have is you can't have fear. Right? Fear is manufactured. Like fear is it doesn't really exist naturally, right? Um, I guess you could say you have a natural fear of snakes and stuff like that, but I mean it's manufactured, right? In terms of business, I don't believe in fear in business. Um, you got to work your way through that as quickly as possible, right? I still get anxiety from time to time. It's as that is you're going to feel that, right? When you're trying to do big things, anxiety is just part of it. But you got to find a way to work through that. And so, my journey has been one of just not being afraid to reach out, and that's how I got my, that's how I got my VC career started. So to your point, that unknown story, just like I went after this legend in the hedge fund industry, went after a legend in the VC industry, called for like 2 weeks straight to the point where his executive assistant answers after about 2 weeks straight of calling, and she goes, Matthew, she goes, my job is not to answer your phone calls all day, every day. I was calling, I was in this poor lady, it was like 2 or 3 times a day for like 2 weeks solid. And she goes, hey, she goes, when he's back in the office, I told you he's pretty much retired these days. When he's back in the office, I'll have him call you. And it hangs up on me. I'm like, well, that's it for that. And I don't know, it was probably close to a week later or so. I do remember it was on a Thursday, and I knew it was on a Thursday because it was my Friday off. Right, the way we worked at Albemarle was 980s, and so I was already having a great Thursday because I didn't have to work Friday, and so it was in the afternoon. I see this San Francisco, this 415 area code pop up on my phone. It hits me. I'm like, it's him. And so I go close my office door. I answer the phone, and now mind you, I was doing a job in Houston for Albemarle, and so I pick up the phone and answer, hey, this is Matthew Tarver, and the voice on the other end goes, I understand you're the most annoying person east of the Mississippi River. And Burke, my response was, well, that's probably true, but currently I'm in Houston, so I'm west of the Mississippi. And he goes, oh, you're a smart aleck too. I like you already. And that was it. That was the beginning of a great relationship, and that's how I got my essentially what ended up being my leap into venture capital. Came from a cold call. I just didn't want to take no for an answer. Um, so that's it. I kind of I tend to look at myself as an emerging VC fund manager. There's been a new term that's been floating around out there, right? Um, it's been like founder VC, and I'm kind of starting to embrace that term a little bit. At first, I was kind of like, yeah, nah, are we really founders? But we are. I mean, I've built, myself and my partner have built Foundt Capital from the ground up. Right? So when you have to launch something, no matter what it looks like, um, you're a founder, and because he and I go through some of the same growing pains as we would if we were actually, leading some of the ventures we were in. Right? They're just different problems. So,
So Matt, you get a call from this gentleman who's big in the VC
yep.
world. You're in Houston. You're on a job site. Tell me, how did what happens from there? Like, how does that conversation go? Like you said, so he says you're smart. I like you. Where does the conversation go from there, and what happens next?
Yeah, so I kind of took him through. I said, look, I'm not I'm not trying to solicit funds from you. I want to make that clear. I'm looking for some advice, right? I'm new to this industry. I don't have a fund. I have no experience. I'm an engineer. Right? And he's like, all right, tell me a little bit about the company. So I take him through it, 15, 20-minute elevator pitch, and he's asking great questions. And from there, he goes, look, I think I've heard enough. I'd like to get you and the founder to come fly out. So he paid for our plane tickets to go fly out there. We met. We had about another month of some deep dive due diligence that we went through, and then he decided to be the lead investor. And that it was at that point we were probably almost 2 months into the process, and I get an email from him saying, "Look, you seem to have a passion for this. If you'd be willing to come and if you'd be willing to move out here, I need you a minimum of 6 months. I'll show you the ropes. I'll teach you how to do things in VC. And at that point, we can probably get you a job with one of our partners. You work there a few years, and maybe one day you'll have your own fund." And I'm like, man, this is a lot all at once. Um, Obviously, I ended up taking him up on that, but it wasn't without once again having to deal with naysayers and doubters, and most of that was from my own family. Certain members of my family were like, "You're crazy! You're going to leave a six-figure engineering job to go work for some old guy?" And I'm thinking to myself, "You better Google this old guy. This guy's a legend." And so I knew right then and there with that amount of people, trying to tell me to play it safe, play it safe. I'm like, that's the last thing I need to do in this. I'm in my early, mid 20s. I'm not playing it safe. I had, was not married, right? No kids, nothing really holding me back, right? I was just truly responsible for myself at that moment in time. So I took a leap of faith, moved out to the Bay Area. I was there for a little over 6 months, and that got me a job with Sohan Capital. I spent several years working there. We had a great run, and then April of 2022 is when I launched Foundt, and haven't looked back since. You know, I haven't had a second guess about whether I belong where I'm at right now. Um, I'm glad I still get to use my engineering degree every day, but I'm in the industry I belong in, right? And there was never a second thought of that.
That's incredible. And then
Yeah.
the last question I want to ask you is during that pitch. So he says, "Walk me through the company." You're on the phone. What was that pitch? I mean, how did you pitch it to a point where he was like, I'll fly you, your co-founder out. I'll meet with you guys and I'll pay for everything.
Thinking back on that, the I would say the route that I chose was one that I didn't even realize that I was already trying to sell that we were building something in the future. I knew the vision, as it was pitched to me from the founder. And in my role, the fancy title we worked out for me, business development manager, um, I was focused on just trying to relay the vision. And so the genesis of our call was I gave a little bit of the technical, right? Okay, this is a chip startup, right? This was when Nvidia was starting to tinker as well. And it was the right time. You can never underestimate the timing. By the way, this is the right time to be talking to any VC about a microchip startup. So I pitched some of the advantages, faster processor, yada yada, whatever, and then I just say, look, imagine a world where you've got a chip advanced enough, to where you can prompt it with one little prompt, and it spits out an entire contract for you. I remember that being an example I used. And what I was alluding to is what we now know is what Chat GPT does for us, right? These just high powered algorithms, right? That that essentially are changing the way we interact with computers. Now, I didn't even know what AI was at the time. By the way, I had no clue what that term even was. But I was pitching him on AI, essentially AI powered chips without real recognizing it. So I don't want to take any credit that I don't deserve, because just by chance I bought into Craig's vision, who was the CEO of the company. I bought into his vision, lock, stock, and barrel, and I presented that vision right to a venture capitalist, and he saw it. So again, without recognizing exactly what I was doing, I talked about how we were going to build this chip, and I talked about what the future was going to look like, and that we're already there, right? A couple more iterations, and we've already done it. We're already living there, and that was it. So in looking back on that, I saw that, being reflective several years later, I saw where, when I started reading about Mike Maples Jr. and kind of his theory of looking into founders and making sure that they are building their product in the future, and that they're already living there. I said, holy smokes, we inadvertently did that. So it just worked out for us that way.
Incredible. You actually took your own advice of make them feel like they're living in the future. Tell them what the future
Without
will look
knowing
like.
it. Yep.
Wow. That's amazing. So
Yep.
those are it for the questions I've got. Is there anything that you'd like to add, talk about, any more stories that you'd like to tell?
Yeah. Well, I'll add on. I'll add on to this existing one, and then I bet I have one or two more. But on this particular, this is my first, the first startup I was ever involved in, obviously. Um, but that's just the thing, it. I you never underestimate that there's a little bit of luck that goes along with some stuff, but luck to me is not it's not just a out there, magical type thing, right? It's I I happen to see a vision that I aligned with, right? And alignment is half the battle, all right? And so to any aspiring founders out there, or those who already are, you got to make sure you and your team are aligned. If Craig and I weren't aligned on his vision, right? If I didn't necessarily agree with it, or I wasn't sold on it, or completely bought in, I probably wouldn't have presented it the right way, right? You know, I wouldn't have had my message wouldn't have come across the same, is what I'm trying to say. Now, the luck part that I attribute to it is it so happened that in that moment I was on the phone with the right VC, right? Who saw the way that market was going with microchips and microprocessors, um, and really I was able to capture for him something that he was already seeing for himself, and he, over the next month or so, we were able to buy him in that we were the right team to do it as well. And so, but that didn't come out. Like there were months and months leading up to that of the same type of conversations with other VCs, um, or some investment bankers who didn't buy in, right? So the luck part, what the message that I'm trying to convey here is that you do make your own luck, and you do that by being relentless, right? So I got lucky on that phone call that I'd finally found the right person to talk to, but that didn't come before talking to probably about 60 other people. So let's call it 1 out of 60. That right there looks like luck, but luck is usually masked as hard work, right? And if you put in that hard work, you create your own luck.
Incredible. And
That's
basically,
that's my take on that. Yeah.
I think there's good advice for young people in there, which is kind of like what you did, where you're an engineer, you meet Craig, or Craig pitches at this dinner. You're like, wow, this chip startup, it
Yep.
can actually go places. Like it's got an incredible vision. You find yourself in alignment. You go up to Craig, say, look, I want to help you with this. I think I don't have money to invest right now, but I want to help in any way possible. That leads you to cold calling all these VCs for him. Eventually, after talking to 60 plus people, you find the right one, talk to the guy, and all these things happen, which also leads you to building your own fund at some point. But the advice in there really for young people is like, if you don't have an idea of your own and you're not really sure, you can always go find someone that's building something that excites you, find any way to help them, be scrappy, and you never know where that's going to take you. Would you kind of, do you think that's fair advice for the young people that are watching this?
It definitely is. I think that's the advice. Honestly, it's never be afraid to just put yourself out there, right? I think that everyone has something to offer the world. Just for a lot of times they get in their head, or the most common one is they listen to the people around them, right? And love my family. Obviously, love my family. I'm a huge family guy. But if I had listened to most of the people in my family, I probably wouldn't be. You and I wouldn't be having this conversation today. Maybe we'd be having one about something else, but it wouldn't be because I'm, a founder, of a VC fund. It would be for something totally different. So, yeah, always find a way to put aside fear no matter what you're doing, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You have something unique to offer the world. um, Go offer it, and call and talk to as many people as you can, right? The first 10 are going to suck, probably. It just is, right? You're going to be nervous. You're not going to have, you're going to scramble your pitch, whatever it is. Each time be reflective, right? Take notes, write it down right after the call. What went great, and what you want to get rid of, or what you want to improve on. And it's an iterative process, right? And by the time you get to that 20th or 30th person, that message is refined. I mean, you're a well-oiled machine at that point, and now it's just a matter of finding the right person. for whatever vision you might have as a founder, there is the right person out there for you. You just got to find who she is or who he is, because they're out there, and it all comes down to aligning with them, right? Never underestimate that.
Yeah. The more people I meet, the more I seem to realize fear is something that every single successful person in business has missing. They just don't have it. They'll cold call anyone, they'll email anyone, and they just don't care.
Yep.
They'll hop on a call with anyone. They'll just figure it out as they go on. That's a great ending note.